Hi everybody, TJ Mac Vintage Cards here, and today I'm doing hockey set profile. Haven't done one of these in a while. I've been so caught up in my vintage hockey case build that most of my hockey videos are related to that. So I thought, well, it's long overdue. I might as well do one of these again. I have done some football and baseball since then, and still like doing those, but these tend to be pretty popular videos with the viewing community because they like to look at, I think, the different cards from the sets, and these are all the key cards from the 72 top set with some OPC sprinkled in here and there when there wasn't a Topps card available, or if I just like that particular image. Because there are some differences for some of the players between the OPC and the Topps in this year. So, like, for example, let me just go down and look at one. Stan Mikita has a different card. This is his Topps card. His OPC's a closer up shot, and he has his helmet on. And then over here, you have this Gilbert Perreault. He's got more of a studio type image instead of a game shot in the OPC version. So this is the Topps version, as I said. And then here's the Phil Esposito. He's, I believe, in his white Boston Bruins uniform, or sweater, as they call it in hockey, versus the brown sweater. And then what's interesting here is you can see he's got dress pants on, which is kind of funny. But he's got his sweater on for the photo, at least. So let's go through and we'll talk a little bit about this set. I'll give you an overview of it first of all. There was 176 cards in the top set from that year, and OPC had 340 cards. It was the largest set issued up to that time for OPC. In the fourth series of the OPC card, which was the last series, cards 290 through 340, they're fairly in short supply compared to the other series, and they featured all the WHA cards from that year. And it was the World Hockey Association, which was an offshoot created in response to the NHL for competition. And they actually took some of the NHL players to formulate the league, one being this gentleman right here, the great Bobby Hull. And Bobby Hull has a Topps card in the set of him as an All-Star and an OPC as well, with him as an All-Star in the Blackhawks from an earlier series. But by the time they got to the last series, he was signed with the WHA with the Winnipeg Jets. A really cool logo here. You can see World Hockey Association, Winnipeg Jets. And this was the card that they put out for him that year. And this card and the Tim Horton are fairly tough to get, as well as I'd say the Sittler, because these are the last, this is Series 3, I believe, those two. And then, like I said, starting with card 240, or 290, it hit Series 4. So there's the Bobby Hull. So I'm just going to go through now and just talk a little bit about the look of the cards. And as you can see here, there's a player photo encapsulated in a rounded rectangular shape in the inset there of the card. It has an attractive brown border, which I really like, and it shows the team name going up the side of it. So there's Detroit Red Wings, and then you got this yellow banner going across, or stripe, with the player's name, Marcel Dion here, with a really cool player logo. The things that really make these cards extra attractive to me is the colors that they use in the background shots on a lot of these cards. Look at that Gump Worsley, for example, and the Mikita right next to each other, and the blue and the pink. And then you got a really sharp Boston Bruins backdrop. There's a little more darker green, which is kind of interesting because that green's a little different shade than the Red Wings green. So they did a really nice job bringing the colors out on these cards. And then they did have some game shots in the set. I only show one off in this video that actually doesn't have a backdrop because it's an actual game shot. So like a little mix there, which I find interesting. To me, I think it's kind of a little quirky thing about the set that I like. And then in the back of the card, I'll flip one over. You can see the statistical information. It's got the cartoon. It says Alex, in this case, Alex DeVecchio is captain of the Red Wings. And just typical Topps background from the 70s that you would see on other sports as well. So nothing overly crazy, but just a nice background. And then on the OPC, it's just got a little different shade. So you can see where this one's a little darker. The OPC's got a little more brighter. And in later years of OPC, they could get really bright compared to the Topps. Almost like the Topps traded backdrops for baseball, or the Tiffany's, where they're real bright. which I kind of like. I do prefer the OPC backs to the tops because I like the brighter card stocks. That's just the background there. And then there's go stats here on the Bobby Hall one. Just the French and English. And then it's got the World Hockey Association logo at that time. And then the tops cards would also say on the back right here, watch NHL hockey on NBC television or NBC TV, which I think is kind of cool too. Hockey's still on NBC at this time right now. And that wasn't continuous through all those years, but that's where it currently stays today. So let's go through now. We'll talk about some of the players. Here's Marcel Dion. He had 40 goals and finished with 90 points that year. And this is before he went to the Kings. He was drafted by the Red Wings originally. This is the great Jacques Plante, who is better known as the Montreal Canadiens goaltender for those dynasty teams of the 50s and early 60s. He began the season that year with the Maple Leafs, and he was traded to the Bruins late in the 72-73 season. He recorded a shutout against the Blackhawks in his debut for the Bruins, and then he played 8 regular season games, 2 playoff games before finishing the season, which was his last in the NHL. He did come out of retirement in 1974, and he played 31 games with the Edmonton Oilers for the WHA. And then he went to training camp the next year, but he retired. I guess his oldest son died, according to, I looked that up in Wikipedia. His oldest son died, so then he went into retirement after that. But he does have some WHA cards that are out there. I don't have those, but they're with the Edmonton Oilers, which I think is pretty neat. Then here you got always a bridesmaid, never a bride, Brad Park, who finished second for the Norris Trophy as best defenseman several times. He was unfortunate that he played in the era of Bobby Orr, who just dominated winning that trophy. Lauren Gump Worsley, one of my favorites from that era. I just did a video on him a little while back from my vintage hockey case build. You can check that out. He was a real character of the game, and I just enjoy Gump. Just one of those fun guys, and really wore his emotions on his sleeve, which I kind of like that, especially as a viewer of sports. It's kind of fun to watch those kind of characters. And then Stan Mikita right here, shown without the helmet. He was one of the early players to wear a helmet after he got part of his ear taken off by a hard shot, and a puck, projectile puck went flying, so to speak, and took part of his ear off. There's Johnny Buchik, had 40 goals for the Bruins. He's kind of a late bloomer type player. Was real instrumental on those 70s Bruins teams that won a couple Stanley Cups. The great Guy Lafleur. And then you got Bobby Clarke here. He was won his first of his 3 MVPs in 1972. And what's interesting about him is that year he finished second in the league with 104 points. He was from Fin Flan, Manitoba. I just had to put that in there because I want to say that name, Fin Flan. I think that's kind of a fun word, fun couple words to say there. And he was really considered a superior talent when he came out. He had diabetes, though, and there was health concerns, and he dropped to the second round of the draft, like the 17th pick in the second round. So a couple teams passed him over twice. This guy really should have been a top player, or at least in the top couple players taken in the draft. And what they found out about him is they made a mistake by not drafting him. The diabetes was never an issue for him. He was just one of these really hard-working players. Nobody really worked as hard as Bobby Clarke did. He was instrumental on those Broad Street Bullies Flyers teams that won back-to-back Stanley Cups. The first being an upset, I believe it was in 1974. Big upset over the Boston Bruins. And then they beat my Buffalo Sabres in 1975 to win back-to-back cups. I'm going to do another video on Clarke and the Bruins a little later in the future, because there's some really interesting things about that team at that time. And here's the great Bobby Orr. Love this card. He's my guy from that era, and I do try to collect as many cards of him as I can from that era. I just want to have different examples of his. I will never get his rookie, and likely not his second year, but I have pretty much the rest of his cards from that era. And then he also won his Norris Trophy that year. I think it was his 6th in a row that he had won, and he was third in the league with 101 points that year. Highest scoring defenseman, which was very common for him. And then next to him, you got Gilbert Perreault with the Buffalo Sabres. And then here's Tony Esposito. He did have a different card as well. This is his OPC. I like the white jersey. He also has, in the tops, he's in his red jersey, and it's a little fuller of a shot of him. And then next to him, you have Frank Mahovlich, who I've also profiled in my hockey case vintage build. This is him with the Montreal Canadiens. Later career example of him. And then here's another later career example. He played with Frank Mahovlich for a little bit with the Red Wings with Gordie Howe on that production line 2, which was just a great offensive line that the Red Wings had in the late 60s. They called it the production line 2 because the production line 1 was their line from the 40s into the 50s with Gordie Howe, Ted Lindsay, and Sid Abel. And then next to him, you have Phil Esposito, and this guy was just an incredible scorer. I mean, unfortunately, he played second fiddle somewhat to Bobby Orr on that team because Bobby Orr is an all-time elite, probably Mount Rushmore type player. But Phil Esposito certainly a top, probably 15 best player of all time if I had to try to rank them. But he was the NHL leader in scores and goals that year with 55, also with assists with 75 and points with 130. He did not win the MVP. Again, that went to Bobby Clarke. He was the only player in the 70s, that whole decade, to score over 500 goals. He finished with 509, which was over 100 goals more than second place Guy Lafleur. He was also the only player of the decade to have over 1,000 points. He had 1,087, which was 100 more, over 100 points more than Guy Lafleur had as well. So really just an incredible player. I mean, he wasn't really the greatest skater. Had a great shot, just one of those guys that was always around the net. And just a great opportunist. And he developed a scoring touch, it was said, his very accurate shot, working with his brother, Tony Esposito, as kids when they grew up in Sault Ste. Marie in Canada. And he practiced quite often with his brother, who was also a Hall of Fame player as a goaltender. So he really got to practice with one of the best. And he really just blossomed later in his career. He was traded from the Blackhawks to the Bruins, and he just really took off once he got to the Bruins and became one of the greatest scorers of all time. I mean, he scored over 70 goals one year, which up to that point, nobody scored more than goals than in the 50s. So he really was one of those transitional type players in the NHL at that time. And there is a great bumper sticker that was out in the 70s, and it said, Jesus saves, but Espo scores on the rebound. so that was just one of those great bumper stickers of that time. And really happy to have a lot of his cards in my collection because he's just one of those really special type players. And then next to him we have, I mean, who else? This guy doesn't really need much introduction if you know anything about hockey, is Ken Dryden. He was a 5-time Vezina Trophy winner. This was his first year winning the Vezina. The Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup that year. Surprise, surprise, in that era. And they beat the Chicago Blackhawks 4-2. That year, the Canadiens were 52-10 with 16 ties. Dryden led the way with 33 wins, 9 losses, and a 2.26 goals against average. So just one of those great players of that era. And here we got Darryl Sittler next to him, Tim Horton, Buffalo Sabres, and we'll finish up with the Bobby Hull. This video went a little long, but I wanted to do a really deep dive into this set. I hope everybody enjoyed, and you have a great weekend.